Hi guys, so today what we're going to learn about is how to write an equation, a quadratic function, from standard form to vertex form. So please make sure you're going to turn in these notes, so make sure you put your name, your class period, and today's date, which is 9/23/2015 on your papers. You always want to head your papers, okay, because you don't want to lose credit on something you did just because you forgot to put your name on it and your class period. Okay, so if we go back to our notes, we know that standard form is a function, a quadratic function in the form ax squared plus bx plus c. And vertex form is the form that we've been kind of learning more about this week, which is a times x minus h squared plus k. You can actually write a function in either one of these forms and it ends up coming to be the same function. So we're going to learn a little bit more about how to do that exactly. Okay, the first thing I'd like you guys to do is we have to kind of review a little bit about FOIL. I'm going to leave some space up here for the essential question. I'm going to skip a couple of lines, and I want you to remember you use 3 fingers to draw the line down the middle. Then you stop at, not at the very end, but almost to the end of your paper, so you can have enough space for your summary. Okay, and then at the very top, you're obviously going to have space for your notes. And then on the left-hand side, this is where, after you watch the video, you're going to write down, okay, what was the main idea covered in the lesson, in the video, main ideas, and then do you have any questions? Okay, here's going to be the notes section, and then at the very bottom you're going to write down the summary. Okay, so our essential question is, how can I write a quadratic function in standard form into vertex form and vice versa? So if I have the function in vertex form, how can I write it into standard form? Okay, so in the past, in this subunit before, and what we learned last week and this week, is we know that the key attributes of a function include the axis of symmetry, the vertex, the zeros, which are also called x-intercepts, and then also the y-intercepts. So those are some things that we learned before, and so now we're going to learn how to complete the square. We're going to complete the square, and we're also going to FOIL. One of the things that I need to go over with you is the FOIL method. I realize that a lot of students are a little rusty when it comes to the FOIL method. The FOIL method is really easy, okay? You have, let's say, a function or a binomial that says x minus 6 times x minus 2. In order to figure out what that is, you multiply what stands for f, which is multiplying the first terms together. So the product of the first terms, okay, in this case, is the same thing as x times x. So you're going to multiply x times x. And then it asks you to the letter O. The letter O stands for the outer terms. So you're multiplying the x, which is on the outside, and the -2, which is on the outside of your parentheses. I'm going to write it a little bit squishy. Product of outer terms. Okay, so that would be positive x times a -2. And then the I stands for multiplying the inner terms. So you're going to multiply -6 times x. So those are the inner terms. I'm running out of space a little bit, so I'm just going to write inner. Okay, and what are the inner terms? The inner terms that are inside of the parentheses, which is -6 times -6 times a positive x. And then at the very end, the last letter out of the FOIL method is we have our first terms, we have our outer terms, we have our inner terms, and now we have at the very end the last terms. So you're going to multiply the last terms in your binomial together. In this case, they're -6 and -2. So I'm going to write outer. So O and then I. Outer terms are -6 times -2. Alright, sorry guys, I'm recording at school and people keep knocking at the door. Alright, so what's x times x? Gives you x squared. What is x times a -2? Gives you -2x. -6 times x is -6x, and then a -6 times a -2 ends up being a +12. Okay, and then I'm just going to put like an equal sign here, okay, and then I'm going to squish it all together. So if I were to rewrite it onto one line, I know that x minus 6 times x minus 2 is actually x squared minus 2x minus 6x plus 12. Well, now it comes to our second vocabulary term, which is to combine like terms. You want to get people who are from the same group, from the same family together. And in this case, it's only the x's. So your final answer would be, your simplified answer, would be x squared, -2x minus 6x. So they're both negative, so it's going to be a -8x plus 12. Okay, x squared minus 8x plus 12. This is the FOIL method. Okay, so the FOIL method was kind of some background information that we needed to know in order to be able to check our answers. Okay, so this is our first example. Example 1. If I'm asking you to solve 16x squared plus 8x equals to 0, the first step, you always want to factor the greatest common factor, GCF, the greatest common factor. So what number do 16 and 8 have in common? If you said 8, you are correct. So 8 times what gives you 16? That would be 2. So 8 times 2 gives you 16. But I need a 16x squared. So it's going to be 2x squared. 8 times 2x squared gives you 16x squared. And then 8 times what will give you 8x? That is correct. That is 1x. So now you have 8 times 2x squared plus 1x. So we factored out the 8 from both of these terms. And by looking at the function one more time, I also noticed something else they have in common. And that is the x. An x in both of these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, instead of just factoring out an 8, I'm still going to get a pretty big function. So I'm going to actually factor out 8x. That will simplify and take out the greatest common factor. So 8x times what will give me 16x squared? That will be 2x. 8 times 2 gives you 16. X times x gives you x squared. So now the question is 8x times what will give me 8x? That's correct. That's just 1. I don't need an x here because I already have an x on the outside. So now that we factored out the greatest common factor, we are done. And we need to solve, solve for x. So you have 8x is equal to 0, and you have 2x plus 1 is equal to 0. So those are your two possible solutions. And when you do the math, you know that 8x is equal to 0. You are multiplying 8 times x. The opposite of multiplication is to divide. Whatever you do to one side of the equal sign, you have to do to the other side of the equal sign. And that's easy. What's 0 divided by 8? What's any number divided by 8 is actually equal to 0. 8 divided by 8 just gives you 1. So I'm left with 1x is equal to 0. That's one of our x-intercepts. X is equal to 0. Then we do the other side. 2x plus 1 is equal to 0. You're going to do PEMDAS backwards, which is to add and subtract first. And then I'm left with 2x is equal to negative 1. You're doing the same thing. You subtracted negative 1 from both sides of the equal sign. And what is 2 times x? How do we get rid of the 2 hanging out in the front? We have to do the opposite of multiplication, which is division. You have to divide both sides by 2 of the equal sign. 2 divided by 2 just turns into 1x. And then 1x is equal to 1/2. So if I was going to graph those equations, at step 3, solve for x by solving, set each equation equal to 0. So maybe I should switch those steps, okay? Set the equation equal to 0 and then solve for x. Once you solve for x, you know that these are your x-intercepts. So if I were to ask you to sketch a graph of these, you know that your function would be your x and y coordinate. You would have it cross the x-axis at 0 when x is equal to 0 and when x is equal to 1/2. It's actually going to be a really skinny graph. If you look at 16x squared, 16 is positive, so that's going to be facing up. Okay, so using these notes and these steps tomorrow in class, you can try them now if you like. We're going to solve 20x squared plus 15x equals to 0. We're going to do 4y squared plus 16y is equal to 0. And C, 6a to the power of 5 plus 18a to the power of 4 is equal to 0.